Being an educator is one heck of a lonely journey, but every step holds a story, an experience that shapes how we teach, learn, and grow. Welcome to the Educator Experience. I'm your host, Salli Carter, and together we'll explore the moments that define us as educators. Through authentic conversations and shared experiences, we're building a community that connects, reflects, and inspires, all while breaking down barriers in education, one story at a time. You are not alone. Let's grow together. Welcome, everyone, to the Educator Experience podcast. I'm your host, Salli Carter, and I'm really excited to welcome today Domenic Scuglia. You've been involved in education for multiple decades now, with the most recent of 8 as Director of Education for multiple school boards across Canada. But I also know that you started off in kinesiology in the classroom. One of the things I'm most excited to sit down with you about is that you've been involved in so many different levels of education, from the classroom to administration to boards. And so thank you so much for joining. And I'm sure you have a plethora of amazing, fun experiences or interesting experiences. But is there anything that stands out to you that you're open to sharing with today that's been impactful for you in your career?
You started off by saying that I started in the classroom in kinesiology, and that led me into passions around fulfilling my lifelong goal to become a phys ed teacher in a secondary school. And that also then led me into being a coach. And the sport of passion for me has been rugby my entire life. That was one of the sports that I coached when I was a secondary school teacher. And I share that with you because I really believe firmly that the knowledge and skills that I acquired through that coaching have significantly impacted my role in leadership in so many ways. In that happened to be a team sport, and not that team sport is the only way you acquire these skills, but certainly the team sport concept taught me a lot about working together, and that synergy in achieving a goal, which was to be a winner. And sometimes you didn't win, and that was okay. I think really served me well in my career and eventually in my role as a teacher and then administrator, whether it was at the school level or at the district level. And as you mentioned, in the province of Saskatchewan and the province of Ontario.
That's amazing. So in your coaching career, is there a specific moment that stood out to you that somewhat impacted you, or you think your students as well?
Well, I would say that there have been a number of experiences. It's kind of interesting that you asked this question because this morning I belong to this other sort of chat group where I've offered my services as a volunteer to mentor young aspiring students who are graduating looking for a job. She was asking me the same type of question, and I said, I think what you need to do is know that there will be a number of experiences during the course of your life that you may not be aware of, but are there for a reason and are there to impact your growth as a leader and as a future employee. And so even though to this very day, you just think this is a bit of a nuisance that's happening to me because she was working through an issue with her school, it was there to teach her a lesson. And so together we worked through what that possible lesson may have been. And we came up with a plan and a solution to address the challenge that she was facing. She also happens to be a newcomer to Canada, and she's studying at one of our colleges here in the GTA in the Greater Toronto area. And she's an amazing person. And as much as she may be learning from me, I'm learning just as much from her.
I appreciate that. So the impact on you is that you're still learning as well. Is that fair?
Yeah. And that was my message to her,
Yeah.
at my tender age, in my late 60s, that, I've always been a firm believer of being a lifelong learner. And so I'm not stopping. And that's my message to her as well. In fact, my daughter, who's a teacher also, has been a massive Harry Potter fan, J.K. Rowling's. And last year, I got into the series at this stage, and now I'm retired. And I have got more time at my disposal to invest in reading that is not necessarily always professional, but for enjoyment. And I'm in the last book. I won't say anything in case anybody's
I
listening because
haven't read it. I feel
well,
like I am among the uh few, very
it's
few. I know.
after book six, it took me a week to recover with some of the events that unfolded.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you've inspired me. That's it. So coaching, mentoring, being part of a team, all of these things have impacted you. What else?
Well, I think over time I've also had my own mentors, and not even realizing that I was being mentored and I was the mentee. And later on, reflecting on those individuals and really appreciating how they've helped guide and shape my ability to be a good leader. And I remember I was in my gymnasium at the school I was teaching at, and I don't know. I was thinking that I love this job and I love what I'm doing, and I'm going to spend the rest of my career being a phys ed teacher, and I was totally settled with that. And in walks my vice principal, and he says, "Hey, Scuglia, have you seen the posting in the staff room?" And I said, "No, I don't really go to look at postings." He said, "There's one that has your name on it. It's an application for the principal's qualification program. You need to go do it." I said, "Pardon me?" And so at that point in my career, I was in, I guess, my 14th year of teaching and happy doing what I was doing. I took this new course based on the support and advice that I received from my dear friend and vice principal, who tapped me on the shoulder and saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so then I was on this path to becoming a principal and a vice principal, and then a superintendent. The same thing occurred as a superintendent. I took my papers to become a superintendent. And then I was blessed to be offered the job to go to Regina to serve as their director of education for 5 years. Again, on a journey of learning through each of the experiences that I've had. We were going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think, and not to move it to there right away, but I think that the experiences that I've had in my career have fostered a groundwork of understanding in the importance of creating places where everyone, not just the children in the school, but the adults who are leading and providing nurturing and instruction to those children, create a sense of belonging. And that every child has a sense of belonging within that school. And I will fight tooth and nail to achieve that goal, even to this day, and some of the other things that I'm doing.
When you talk about sense of belonging, if you're looking at it from your various perspectives or lenses, from classroom educator to administrator and director of education, how do those differ?
Well, so I mean, they would differ from the perspective that as a classroom teacher, you have a very immediate and direct impact on the 30 or so odd children that you have been tasked to be responsible for, to provide their curriculum for that year that you're teaching. And what I've learned over time is that within that classroom, you will have a myriad of needs of students, whether they are educational, academic, or social, emotional, or psychological. Each child starts their day wanting to do well and have a great day. But what we don't know is when they leave that home, what barriers or issues are they carrying with them that become the barriers in the classroom, and that we as the educator need to understand and work towards removing that barrier so that that child has equity of access to the curriculum. So then you move to the principal, and now you have a staff, depending on how large your school is. I've had staffs of 100 as a principal. And so now you want to inspire those teachers to also understand that those barriers that children, they don't wake up in the morning coming, "I'm going to make your day miserable together to to their teachers. They don't do that. That's not their DNA. And acknowledging and recognizing that those barriers are present in each and every one of us, and including ourselves. Like we may go to school one day and we're having a bad day, and we need to be self-aware that, hey, I need to just kind of step back and make sure that I've got my emotions in check when I'm working with this group of 30 kids or 100 staff, because what I say may have a negative impact on their day. And then you move it to the director level, and the sphere of influence is even greater. The school board in Ontario, we had 8,000 adults that worked for us in a variety of roles, and we had 50,000 kids, 103 schools. So massive organization across a large geographical area just north of the city of Toronto. And as the CEO, you are tasked with that responsibility of providing that leadership that is going to help each and every individual understand what that sense of belonging is. And I use different approaches with each different role in how those messages were then translated into those individuals who, whether they worked at the central office or in the classroom or were administrators themselves.
It's funny that you say sense of belonging. I was actually having a conversation with a colleague this morning, but coming from a different perspective and
Mm.
a sense of belonging for educators. Quite often, I know that when educators are hired, at least for post-secondary, you're given a course, but sometimes that's all. You just kind of smacked on your butt and sent on your way type of
Mhm.
thing. And there isn't a sense of belonging or community or camaraderie or inclusion. A lot of educators are just kind of left on their own. And I imagine that's possibly something you dealt with as an administrator, trying to create a sense of belonging, not just for students, but also for educators as well. And that's where a lot of the work that I do right now stems from is community and inclusion for educators as a whole, going beyond students as well. Yeah.
So I think that's a really powerful statement, and you've really captured it really well. And I think that work that you're doing, it will serve those educators well, because you're right. The last thing you want to do is be on an island by yourself and know that there's nobody coming to help you. Like creating that community gives people those outlets that they can go and say, hey, look, this is what my day was like. What could I have done differently that might have created a different outcome for my students or my staff?
Mhm. And I think that's interesting because you get to see all, or you have seen all of those various levels as well, and how they can still all integrate together, which is
Hmm.
great. What else comes
Hmm.
to mind for unique experiences throughout your career?
So I I was appointed principal. Well, let me just back up for a bit because I spent almost the first 17 years of my career in a very homogeneous community. My background is parents who were immigrants, newcomers to Canada, and they were from Italy. And my first language was Italian. So I went to kindergarten to learn English. I didn't speak a lick of English when I went to school. Interestingly enough, I'm totally fluent in Italian today as a result of it, not realizing that acquisition of language at that early age I would have for the rest of my life. I was fortuitous to be a teacher in an area where people looked like me, had the same heritage as I did, predominantly Italian. And so there were a lot of cultural things that I was able to connect with the kids that I used effectively in the classroom with my students. And the fact that I was also of Italian background gave me a little bit of credibility with the parents when I met with them when there were some challenges with their. So fast forward, and we're now past that place where the my friend tapped me on the shoulder and said that I should go into administration, and I went. I appointed a vice principal in a completely different area of the region. But now I was in a school where I was the minority, and there were no or very few Italians, and a very racialized school. My understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion was very early in its beginnings. But I'll tell you, those 4.5 years at that school allowed me to grow and see and experience some painful things, but also some things that were aha. And again, I was surrounded by incredibly supportive mentors who came from the racialized community, worked alongside me, and helped me to grow in my understanding of how to identify things that were essentially discriminatory or racist that were happening in the school. And, had I not had that educational experience, I don't think I would be the person that I am today. Those were transformative experiences that shaped my knowledge and experience as an educator and changed how I would approach diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work that I did. And then I was appointed principal at a Catholic school not far from where you are.
Mm.
And the name of the school was St. Maximilian Kolbe. And he was a saint who died in Auschwitz. And he gave up his life for another prisoner. They were in Auschwitz and somebody had escaped, and the Gestapo of the community that they were in said 10 people are going to have to die because of the one prisoner escaping, to teach you a lesson that no one's going to escape. So Colby wasn't one of the 10 that was selected. Another prisoner was, and he pleaded with the guard, said, I have a family, please don't, I don't want to die. I want to be able to see my family again. So Colby stepped up in front of the group and said that I'll take his place. And so the Gestapo knew he was a priest. They didn't like priests. And so Colby was one of the ones that died. St. John Paul II was from Poland. And he was very familiar with Colby's story, and he fast tracked the canonization of moving Colby to sainthood. So when I was appointed principal, it was important for me that we did some background understanding of what this person did in their growth. And so we organized a pilgrimage even before the school opened with students, parents, and staff to go to Poland and follow the footsteps of St. Maximilian Kolbe. And from that was born a course which we taught, and it hopefully will continue to be taught, called We Are Witness, where we created people who were witnesses to what happened to Jews and other people who were imprisoned in different concentration camps throughout Europe during World War II under the Nazi regime. And I think that that was another transformative experience for me. And I would say that my highlight from all of that was just watching how both the students and the adults who were part of the program also changed in their view and understanding of what it means to be a marginalized group and be treated in that way, where your life is meaningless and you could be dead in a second. And then just finally, the move to Saskatchewan was also really powerful for me because there's a strong need to be supportive of the Indigenous community in the province of Saskatchewan. Right across Canada there is. It's our goal in Truth and Reconciliation, and call to action number 63 is one that we're rooted in and wanting to make change for the better for Indigenous students in Canada. And 40% graduation rates right across the province for Indigenous students. So that was our goal to change that narrative. In Regina, the school board that I was tasked with leading, we did an amazing job, staff, in changing that narrative from 40%, and we were at 10% students who didn't graduate. So we had 90%.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, the credit to the staff and some of the initiatives that were put in place to support kids and keep them connected in the school. I mean, there's a myriad of reasons why that connection doesn't happen, and proclivity of events that occur over and over and over again that continue to beat those kids and their families down, that don't allow them to experience success.
Those are a lot of transformative moments, as you mentioned, throughout your career. So, if we're to focus for a moment on a new educator, what would you suggest, or what have you seen done before that you could suggest for new educators to create an inclusive classroom? What would that look like?
Yeah, so I think the new educator today is obviously going to be more informed than the educator from when I first started teaching. I think back to when I started in my grade 7 classroom in 1982, that version of Domenic Scuglia as a teacher, I wish I had so many more things in my toolkit that would have made me, and some of those things, and maybe I shouldn't be so hard on myself. I look at those kids, and some of those things that I said and didn't serve those kids well. And it wasn't just out of meanness, it was just lack of knowledge. And I think that today's educator's toolkit is going to be far more fuller than the toolkit that I had when I first started in 1982. And, I refer to things around the best way to deliver curriculum, trying to create learners that are critical thinkers, that aren't afraid to ask hard questions. And that those are skills that are hard for kids to learn, but I think it's important for us to put that kind of learning in front of children because we want our kids when they leave our high schools and our school boards and go on to post secondary to be able to have confidence to ask those hard questions. And I think that the educator of today is equipped with the strategies and the knowledge on how to pass on those types of critical thinking skills that, in my era, I had my kids in rows. My classroom today, if I were would not be
Yeah.
rows, and I wouldn't necessarily have 30 desks and chairs. I would have a variety of desks and chairs, and I'd have flexible seatings. I'd have balls. I'd have benches, and there wouldn't you coming into my classroom today, you would think it's chaos. But the learning that's going on in that classroom would be amazing because each of those environments that the kids would be gravitating to are there to meet their learning needs. And that's knowledge and experience that we've learned over time that, 40 years ago I didn't have. And so today we do have it, and I believe that our educators that are leaving our colleges of education are far better equipped than I would have been 40 years ago.
It's funny you talk about the actual physical classroom space. Anytime I'm put in a lecture theater where I can't move things around, it eats a piece of my soul. Like, what do you mean we can't move? We can't interact. We can't turn around. We can't talk to each other. It's classroom space and classroom physical management is a key part of inclusion, I think, from my perspective.
100%.
If you're to think about students coming into post-secondary on the precipice, what exciting things do you think are awaiting them now?
you know there's so many opportunities for kids, and I think the important thing for us as educators is that we need to equip the kids with the critical skills that they're going to need to ask hard questions, and go and find work that is not necessarily. And I had this discussion with my brother-in-law about, and his viewpoint is that, we need to go and be educated so that we get the highest paying job. And from my point of view, I've always professed that, earning a living so that you can put bread on the table and have a happy life is important. What is equally important to me is job satisfaction. Because you can have all the money in the world and you're in a miserable career, it's going to have a toll on your overall wellness and your health that will cut short some of that enjoyment that you want to have when you finish work. And knock on wood, my health has been good, but my message has always been to creating a work-life balance is extremely important in the big scheme of things called life. And so that would be another message that I would be passing on to kids as they transition from their secondary to post-secondary and then eventually to their workforce. Don't put all that emphasis on landing a job that, yes, the salary looks really attractive, but at the end of the day, there is no work-life balance. That eventually is going to take a toll on you. And I think that's an important message for me personally. And the other message I want kids to have, and I've had to correct many of my colleagues because we tend to emphasize one post-secondary destination as the be-all and end-all of all destinations for kids when they graduate from high school, and that's university. And my message has always been that your post secondary destination is your post secondary destination, regardless of where you end up. In fact, the data shows us that, there's only 30% of our graduates who go to university. The rest have different post secondary experiences. And I think we need to embrace and celebrate each of those equally and not say that university is the only and the best post-secondary destination. Even my guidance counselors when I was a principal would always lead, well, what university do you want your kids to go to? And I said, they may not go to university. You need to stop saying that. You need to embrace all of the destinations because all of them are equal. In fact, my wife and I would say we were guilty of that support as well because both of us university educated. We wanted all three of our kids to go to post-secondary university. And as it turns out, one ended up in college, our second went into the trades, and our youngest, he went to pursue a hockey scholarship in the United States and have all landed successful work today, despite some of the
Different.
pressures
Yeah.
we put on them to follow post-secondary destinations, which is university, which I think is the wrong message to share with young people today as they transition from their secondary schools to post-secondary and then to work.
I appreciate that. Dom, and if we can backtrack for a moment, because you really struck a chord with me when you said or focused on wellness. And you mentioned about wellness with students. What about from your perspective, how you see wellness now with educators, maybe versus 10 years ago? What does that look like?
Well, I think, we've learned a lot with the pandemic. The pandemic has taught us a lot about wellness and looking after ourselves. And, we've now also learned that there are things that we can do work wise that will achieve the same outcomes without creating the same amount of stress. So, and I'm talking about, working from home type of options. You and I are now doing this podcast virtually. I've had many, many meetings where, I've saved my gas, I've saved my wear and tear on my car, my wear and tear on my own wellness, and I have my coffee and I sit in front of a computer and I'm achieving the same outcomes that 10 years ago wouldn't have been possible. And I remember I was in Saskatchewan as we entered into the pandemic in 2020, early 2020. And, the panic was when they shut down the schools and we shut down our workplaces, how are we going to continue kids receiving an education and how would our economies continue to operate when we couldn't go to work? And, that's the fascination of being human, is that we're resilient people, we're intuitive, we're innovative, and we had the tools. We just never were forced to have to use them. So I think things like Microsoft Office Teams and Google Meets, those tools were always available to them, but we just didn't take the time to learn them. Pandemic forced us to learn them, and I think that's changed how we will look at work in the future, how employers will look at workplace in the future. And even when I became director back here in Ontario and we were transitioning our staff back to the office and to the schools, met with quite a bit of resistance at central office, especially, not at the schools, but at central office about why can't we continue with our work from home? We're giving the outcomes that you need. And so we landed sort of on a medium spot where we let people work from home for 1 or 2 days and then they were in the office. And I think wellness for people moving forward will be prioritized because new legislation was also introduced in Ontario, the right to disconnect. Because again, that was taught to us by the pandemic because you are now 24 available on this type of platform to everybody. And I had to put that in place too for myself, because in the role that I had, there were people who were trying to connect with me outside of my time. And I needed to establish those boundaries to protect my own wellness. And I think that that's this legislation on the right to disconnect is a good move, and organizations have been forced to implement them. And I think that's going to really help work-life balance for employees in the future.
I know that K to 12 folks are trained in teaching practices, but in post-secondary, we're hired for a specific expertise or skill set. But not a lot of us are trained in actual teaching, various teaching practices, classroom management, critical thinking, things like that. So this helps bridge the gap between when you're hired and first day of classes and all those things that we don't even know how to ask. And then we'll continue to grow the courses from there.
So can I just tell you that's a pet peeve
Oh,
of
what's
mine?
that?
That the fact that, we spend all this time on assessment for learning and teaching critical skills, but when kids then transition into post-secondary, that professor is, like you said, they're the expert, they're the soothsayer, and they don't have any training in education. So they've got 300 kids in a lecture hall, and it's one mode of delivery. For 1 hour they're talking one way to the kids. And I remember sitting in a lecture hall in some of my classes, and it was blah blah blah, because I reached a point where I tuned out because it wasn't
Right.
something I was interested in. There was nothing that was engaging me. So I think that's really good work, and I think it's important work. And I remember when I was in Regina, we met with the president of the university at the
Oh,
University of
definitely.
Regina, and I said, "Here's what we're doing K to 12. I'm not seeing that happen at your university." And I really got a weak answer from her, because it was all about, these are tenured professors. It's really hard to change culture. It's really hard to change attitudes. And I said, well, you got to figure, because these kids are coming to you with these skills, and you're going the exact opposite way and trying to teach them. So anyways, just a little bit of a pet peeve I thought I'd share with you.
There's so much work to be done. And it's mind blowing that K to 12 there's so much investment in skills for teaching. And it's just kind of
Yep,
left at the wayside for post secondary for sure.
totally agree, and that's good
Yeah.
work, and I'm really happy to hear you're doing it.
We're here to just disrupt an industry and really provide support for post-secondary educators and build a community, right? For people to rely on one another. It doesn't have to be this solo journey or reinventing the wheel. There's a wealth of information out there if we start to share resources, connect with one another. Well, Don, thank you so much as we start to wind down. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for providing me with this opportunity, Sally. I've really enjoyed the chat with you today, and I wish you the best of luck
Thank you.
in the future.
And I
Thank you.
appreciate that we were able to go in so many different directions and tangents. And thank you for rolling with that today. I know we had an original planned schedule, but I couldn't get enough. You have so
Oh,
much
yeah,
to share.
it's all good. Hopefully, someone will connect and resonate with it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate these opportunities to come and share and reflect on my experiences. One of the things that I'm currently contemplating is writing a
Oh,
book.
you have to. It's the next step, next logical
Yeah,
step, isn't it?
and so I've put together some work on establishing what the concept could look
Mhm.
like and what the message would be. And I remember when I was a principal in one of my schools, I had the front office respond to the phone that when calls came in, say at Maximilian Kolbe, where every student matters. It drove them nuts that I would insist that I wanted them to do that. It starts at the front office, the first point of reception when you come into a school. And I want people to know that that's the message and that's the belief that we have when you come into our building. Doesn't matter. Every student in our building matters. I wanted them to know that. So yeah, that's my last piece of information I'll share with
Well,
you. We could
I'm
go on
excited for
for
your next step, and please keep in touch and share that with us. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Educator Experience. We hope you're walking away feeling connected, inspired, and just a little bit more supported on your journey. Ready to go a little bit deeper? Join the Educator Experiences community and check out our courses and workshops specifically designed to support new educators as they navigate the ups, downs, and everything in between. You'll find it all at educatorexperiences.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, share it with a fellow educator and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Together, we're building a vibrant community rooted in support and connection. See y'all next Monday.